Chapter 31 Cleaning Up the Dirt. You are listening at NovelFlow.audio. Looking at the sulfuric acid liquid in front of him, Bai Ye took a deep breath and pressed the palms of his hands into it. Just after the hands were immersed in the water, you could clearly feel the signs of dehydration and carbonization on the skin of the hands due to the corrosion of sulfuric acid. However, with the current strength of Bai Ye's skin, it might take dozens of minutes for obvious wounds to appear. In order to end this process as soon as possible, some physical means must be used. Feeling his hands begin to heat up, Bai Ye began to rub the skin on his hands to ensure that the sulfuric acid could penetrate into the skin faster. Bai Ye found that as his mental attributes increased, his tolerance for pain also increased day by day. The pain that used to make him faint could now be carried out without any hesitation. 2 minutes later, Bai Ye slowly raised his hands from the sulfuric acid. The fingerprints and cuticles on his palms had been completely corroded, and blood was flowing downwards. 10 seconds after the palm left the sulfuric acid, the palm he picked up from the sulfuric acid had begun to stop bleeding due to the powerful healing power. The charred palm that originally had blood flowing downwards soon stopped feeling pain, and instead began to feel the growth of flesh and blood. Strong itching sensation. Next was the head. Bai Ye closed his eyes tightly, looking at the turbid sulfuric acid in front of him, and buried his entire face in it without hesitation. Half an hour later, on Bai Ye's description column, you used sulfuric acid to destroy the epidermis of your head and hands, and it took a total of 156 minutes to fully recover. Repeat 132 times. Physical fitness increased by 0.1. Repeat 65 times, the spirit will increase by 0.1. Looking at the information on the description column, Bai Ye's terrifying face couldn't help but frown. Yesterday, it took 3 hours for a complete cure, but this morning it was reduced to 30 minutes. Moreover, the damage caused by sulfuric acid to the skin will also take more time as the body's physical condition improves, making his action even more urgent. In fact, he was thinking that in order to hide his identity better, it would be better to remove his arms or tear off his face. However, considering that it was difficult to deal with the excess body tissue at that time, and these limbs had to be disposed of after every action, he could only give up on it. Simply putting away the sulfuric acid, Bai Ye changed his clothes, put on a black cloak and walked out of the back door, following a well-traveled path without surveillance, and ran towards Manhattan in New York City. At this moment, in Chinatown at the southern end of Manhattan, New York, a Chinese man in his 40s with a mustache was leaning on a lounge chair. The man was wearing a simple coat and was playing with walnuts in his hand. Next to him stood a groveling young man. "Xiao Wang, I heard that 2 gangsters were picked on in the slum area." The man looked at the young man beside him. "Yes, Uncle Lee. From what I heard in the note, it was done by a disfigured man. I suspect it was the revenge of a mutant." Xiao Wang said respectfully. "New York is not peaceful these days." Uncle Lee shook his head and said with emotion, "No wonder that Bai Ye always went to those small cities to commit crimes before. New York is a land of hidden dragons and crouching tigers. Who knows which big fish he will provoke? Uncle Lee, do you think Bai Ye will agree to give us 30 million? Xiao Wang asked from the side. "He is a smart man. Now that he is famous, it won't take long for him to earn back 30 million. For him, he will not fight with us for this little money." Uncle Lee said with determination, and then he laughed sinisterly, "I will eat this secret for the rest of my life." As he spoke, the Chinatown outside the mansion was already bustling with activity. In broad daylight, a bald man with burned scars on his head walked steadily towards the middle of the street under the eyes of the whole street. "What do you want to do?" Bai Ye's appearance that affected the appearance of the city at this moment made the New York policeman stand in front of him and prepare to interrogate him, but Bai Ye was too lazy to talk nonsense and slapped him, knocking him to the ground. Under the fearful and jealous gazes of the people around him, he stepped over the New York policeman's body and continued to move forward. Just like that, in front of everyone's eyes, Bai Ye paused and stopped in front of a door made of mahogany. Looking at the house in front of him that he often visited a year ago, Bai Ye raised his feet and stepped out suddenly. Boom! As the terrifying force exploded, the thick door bolt broke instantly, and the entire thick mahogany door was kicked out by Bai Ye, broke in half in the air, and crashed down. If knocking the police unconscious before could be considered a supernatural power, now it was definitely beyond the scope of ordinary people. The crowd watching the excitement outside took a few steps back again. The two gang members who were originally guarding the door of the mansion looked at the suddenly flying door and the terrifying man in front of it. They were frightened and subconsciously asked, "Who are you and what are you doing here?" Without wasting any time, Bai Ye's figure was already standing in front of the two of them. His hands were like a vice, grabbing their necks and twisting them hard. Crack! Click! Dot! With the crisp sound of fractures, the two gang members could only fall down in pain, clutching their severely twisted and deformed necks. Before losing consciousness, they heard a hoarse voice coming from the man's mouth, which was the answer to their question. "Come and cleanse the world of filth." At this time, other gang guards in the mansion also reacted, but before they could draw their guns, Bai Ye's vicious eyes full of murderous intent had already locked onto them. For Bai Ye, the distance of only 6 or 7 meters was less than a second. When he stepped hard, he penetrated into their sides under the huge reaction force. In the sight of these people, Bai Ye's scarred palms suddenly enlarged in their eyes, and finally pressed firmly on their Tianling cap. Boom! 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 Although the contact only lasted a moment, when Bai Ye released his palms again, clear palm prints appeared on the foreheads of these people. Under the huge impact from top to bottom, the necks of several people were pressed into the chest by Bai Ye, and the entire cervical vertebrae was broken into several sections. Their legs were weak and they knelt on the ground without any breath. At this time, the door of the room was pushed open violently, and Xiao Wang, a young man who had been groveling next to Uncle Li before, came out and yelled, "Do you understand the rules? Uncle Li is resting inside and making so much noise." But before he could clearly see the environment in front of him, Bai Ye's fist quickly enlarged in front of him, occupying the entire field of vision. It was as if the scene of an exploding watermelon was reproduced on Xiao Wang's shoulders. The bright red liquid and pink and white jelly splashed out instantly, covering half of the room behind Xiao Wang. Uncle Li was lying on the chair, staring blankly at the pile of fleshy foam on his body. A smell of rust rushed to his nose, making him almost nauseous. Seeing Uncle Li's confused look at this moment, Bai Ye curled up his mouth, revealing his white teeth. If the old wall lamp hadn't called him when he had nothing to do, he wouldn't have suffered such a serious crime. Under Uncle Li's confused gaze, Bai Ye turned around and slowly closed the door. As the door closed tightly, painful screams came from the room, which gradually subsided after a full minute. Chapter 32 Peter, My Back. You are listening at NovelFlow.audio. 7 minutes later, in Chinatown, the New York police arrived belatedly. With vigilance, the leading policeman carefully walked into the courtyard through the broken door. Then he saw 5 or 6 corpses in the house that had been killed by one blow, as well as the headless corpse of a man lying at the door of the house. Seeing that most of the room was filled with red and white minced meat, the police officers who witnessed this all took a deep breath. In the center of the room, an S made of blood conspicuously announced its existence. Next to the bloodstains, the body of the gang leader Uncle Li was intact, except for most of the back of his head that had been forcibly rubbed off. After a period of investigation, it was found that more than a dozen people in the entire house were dead from top to bottom, and the entire crime time did not exceed 2 minutes. It was easier to kill than to kill a chicken. Contact the General Administration immediately. The leader of the Red Bell Society died at home. After surveillance, it was determined that the murderer was the same person as the murderer of the other 2 gang killings last night. Branch Director Morgan said with serious eyes, "Unlike other murder targets, this is hunting. As for the target, it is the gang bosses in New York. It is reasonable to speculate that the appearance of the murderer's face may have been disfigured by the gangster gang, which created a deep hatred for the entire underworld, and he did not hesitate to take revenge on the underworld after gaining power." In the club, Bai Ye gently patted the skin on his face that had returned to its original state. After defeating Uncle Li and the gang, he returned. During the healing process of his facial skin, he found that the Jinqi in his body also had the effect of assisting recovery, helping him save about 1/10 of the time. Healing time. Although Uncle Li has been eliminated, we still can't stop. We have already wiped out 3 gangs. From now on, we will kill 4 more gang leaders one at a time and send them down together to complete the task. Bai Ye thought in his heart, after all, he couldn't just kill Uncle Li and then stop killing him. But after solving the most important thing, he didn't have to be so hasty in the next killing. In fact, Bai Ye wanted to wait for the fourth or fifth gangster before taking action against Uncle Li, but because the vest's target was too clear, he was afraid that Uncle Li would hide directly then. Of course, a funnier possibility is that Uncle Li might use his past as a threat to get him to protect him. It's just that the underworld in New York is probably already in turmoil now. If we try again next time, we may encounter mutants and the like, which will be a bit troublesome. Bai Ye said worriedly. With worries, Bai Ye picked up the 1-ton weight in his hand again and started to exercise. Now the only way is to improve himself. In the process of training with concentration, Coach Smith also came to the gym at almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and began to pick up the steel rod and hit Bai Ye's back, hitting Bai Ye's skin one after another. Name, Bai Ye, lifespan, 18/700. Strength, 1.7 plus 0.2. Physique, 1.7 plus 0.2. Spirit, 1.6 plus, charisma, 1.4 plus, attribute points to be used, 0.2. When the time came to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Bai Ye looked at the 0.1 attribute increase in strength and physique, and compared it with his previous physical fitness when the actual strength had just reached 1.8. In fact, the reason why attributes can improve so quickly now is entirely due to the 0.2 attribute points added to the attribute points. According to Bai Ye's normal training speed, the time required for every 0.1 increase would theoretically be more, but those 2 extra attribute points would not affect the experience bar, but only increase the damage when fighting monsters, which also made his upgrade. The speed is like eating multiple experience cards, and it can't be stopped at all. Now I can easily lift 3.4 tons of objects with one arm. In terms of strength, the strength difference between 1.8 and 1.9 should be about 0.7 tons. It is indeed more than the increase from 1.7 to 1.8, but the amount is limited. So the power increase in this attribute panel should be based on an arithmetic sequence. Bai Ye guessed in his heart. After taking a look at the time, Bai Ye turned to Smith and said, "It's 5 o'clock, you can go back." "Are you going to rest so soon today?" Smith asked, puzzled. "I have something to do today. I'm going to find a friend. You can take a rest in advance and come over early tomorrow. I can teach you martial arts." Bai Ye explained. "Tomorrow? Okay, then I'll come over tomorrow morning," Smith said excitedly, and then left happily. Looking at Smith's silly look, Bai Ye shook his head helplessly. This guy didn't understand martial arts at all, and he might still have the illusion that he could reach his level after practicing for 10 days and a half, with the opponent's qualifications of 1.2, which means it only takes half an hour to develop a trace of internal strength. There is no hope that it will have any effect within a year and a half. There is no way to improve him to the point where he can help himself, that is, to directly use his inner strength to empower him. According to Zhutian's statement in the information, the internal power initiation from the same source will consume nearly 20%, which means that within 20 years, the power will only reach the opponent's body in 16 years. At that time, directly using Smith's ready-made living sign to promote it can greatly increase the gold content of the Zhutian magic skills transaction 1 month later. This is a popular skill that can be quickly achieved as long as everyone works for me. As for training methods to resist blows, he already has a short-term goal, which is to become Peter Parker as Spider-Man. As for the long term, he has already started asking Smith to contact the stamping machine manufacturers to try to make a power-speed AA-class stamping machine that can meet his requirements. However, it took 10 days and a half to complete it. During this period, time cannot be wasted. While thinking about it, Bai Ye took out his mobile phone from his pocket on the shelf, turned it on, found Peter's phone number and dialed it. With a burst of ringing, the phone was connected, and Bai Ye said directly without waiting for his reply, "Peter, do you have time now?" "Bai, what do you want to do?" "I just fell on my back. I may need some time to rest." At the corner of the street, Peter said, covering his back. He had just tested his spider silk ability on a tall building, and then he made a mistake and fell down from the building, directly hitting his back. Now he is a little confused. "Oh, really?" Bai Ye raised the corner of his mouth and said with the phone in his hand, I have found a job here that pays at least $20,000 per month and allows you to work part-time after school. You must not consider it. $20,000 a month. Bai, where are you now? I'll come over now. Out of trust in Bai Ye, Peter Parker asked without hesitation. There's a place not far from my home called Maine's Fitness Club. If you look at how far it is, you can choose to take a taxi and I'll reimburse the fare. Maine's Fitness Club. I know, I'll be here in half an hour. Peter hung up the phone, stretched a bit, and felt the bones in his back making a clicking sound, which seemed to be a little better. What kind of job is a part-time job worth 20,000 yuan a month? And I haven't asked Bai about the bank robbery yet. Peter Parker shook his head and thought, then he found the target and ran towards the address Bai Ye gave. As for taking a taxi, forget it. Even if Bai Ye said he could be reimbursed, his family background still made him save subconsciously. With his current physical fitness, as long as he ran faster, it would be easy to reach the destination within half an hour. Chapter 33 Just a superficial injury. You are listening at NovelFlow.audio. Inside the Maine's Fitness Club, Bai Ye was wearing a mask and standing at the door waiting for Peter. 2 or 3 minutes later, Bai Ye's eyes lit up when he saw the blond boy trotting over from a distance. He raised his hand and waved, Peter, here. Bai, the whole class is discussing your matter today. Peter stepped forward and said, I had no idea you were so powerful before. Let's talk after we go in. Bai Ye waved his hand and led Peter into the club. The whole first floor of the club was full of fitness people practicing weights. Bai Ye bypassed them and walked directly to the private gym on the 3rd floor. The atmosphere immediately became quiet. Peter looked at the furnishings in the entire room, paying special attention to a few iron lumps placed in the corner, and then asked, Bai, you haven't said anything yet, what is the 20,000 yuan part-time job you mentioned? Bai Ye turned his back to Peter and said, that's for another time. Let's discuss it first. Discuss? Peter was stunned for a moment, and a numb feeling went from his cervical spine to his brain. Bai Ye turned around quickly, and his right leg was like a giant axe, turning around and kicking him in the head with great force. Bai Ye's trousers screamed as they rubbed against the air. If a normal person received this kick, his entire head would be cut off. Peter leaned back, feeling the air passing by the tip of his nose, and said angrily, Bai, what do you want to do? I just want to test your reflexes. You won't be hurt even if you didn't move just now. Bai Ye took back his right leg and said with a smile, now as an apology, you can punch me. As long as you don't kill me on the spot, you can do whatever you want. That's what you said. A somewhat frightened Peter clenched his fists. Because he wasn't sure whether Bai Ye's body could withstand a punch, he restrained his strength and punched Bai Ye's abdomen lightly. The punch that was just a joke didn't even hurt Bai Ye, but he had successfully achieved his goal. Description column, detect someone attacking you and analyze opponent data. Name, Peter Parker, strength, 3.0. Agility, 2.6. Physique, 2.8. Spirit, 4.2. Charisma, 1.1. Looking at the new information that appeared on the panel description column, Bai Ye was also stunned for a moment. How do you get the value on this panel? I remember that Spider-Man in the movie can pull a 100-ton train traveling at 9 meters per second in 30 seconds. So his strength is at least about 70 tons. His strength is at least 20 times that of mine. As a result, apart from mental energy, the numerical difference between Spider-Man and I on the attribute panel is less than double, although this may be because the other party has just awakened and his physical potential has not been fully developed. After thinking about it, Bai Ye turned his head and looked at Peter, who was unaware. With a harmless and warm smile on his face, he said, Peter, come and help me train. Ah, training. Peter Parker was stunned for a moment. Yes, the part-time job I'm talking about with a monthly salary of $20,000 is to help me with combat training. Bai Ye got up and walked to the backpack in the corner, took out a thick stack of dollars and returned to Peter. In front of Peter, whose eyes were a little straight, Bai Ye gently waved a dozen bills in his hand and said in an extremely seductive tone, as long as you agree, I can advance your salary for 1 month. Looking at the banknotes so close at hand, Peter maintained his rationality and said with some difficulty, "But, what can I help you train?" "It's very simple. You just need to keep hitting me with the stick next to you. This is my training method. Be careful not to beat me to death." Bai Ye said, "You know the changes in my body today?" Peter's eyes were filled with surprise, and he even thought that Bai Ye might have made him stronger. "Of course I know. As for how you know, everyone has their own secrets. How about leaving a little distance between each other?" He was too lazy to make up lies to deceive, so he might as well just not tell them. "Okay, if you just let me hit you with a stick, I will accept this part-time job." Peter did not continue to ask, but chose to accept the part-time job. "Very well, let's start now." Under Peter's surprised gaze, Bai Ye grabbed the 2-ton iron lump in the corner, took root under his feet and began to take up his horse's stride. At the same time, he urged, "What are you doing standing still? Hit me with a stick now." Okay." Peter tightened his grip on the steel rod in his hand and swung it at Bai Ye's back without any force at all. "You should use more force, don't be afraid to beat me to death." Bai Ye urged, and the next moment he felt a slight pain from being hit with a steel rod on his back. Yes, this strength is barely enough. Of course, it would be better if he were 4 or 5 bigger." Bai Ye nodded with satisfaction. The damage of this stick was already higher than that of Smith. Listening to Bai Ye's praise, Peter always felt a little strange, so he put on a little more strength. "The strength of this stroke is simply perfect. Just use this strength and increase the speed at the same time. It is best to maintain this strength and hit different positions on my back as quickly as possible with each stroke." Bai Ye said to Peter, massage extremely satisfied. Soon, the sound of flesh being beaten crazily could be heard throughout the gym. Under Peter's control, the steel rod struck Bai Ye's back crazily at a frequency of 7 or 8 times per second. Every blow can draw a conspicuous red mark on Bai Ye's back, which is comparable to rhinoceros skin at this moment. 4 or 5 minutes later, Bai Ye was still holding the iron lump with both hands, and his feet were tied with horse steps and remained motionless, but the vest he was wearing had torn apart, revealing his bloody and torn back. Seeing this, Peter had to stop what he was doing and said, "Are you really not in pain? Your back is bleeding. It's just a superficial injury. It will heal after a while. If you want to become stronger, this is the best way." Bai Ye said nonchalantly while looking at the progress displayed on the description column. "With the blessing of the Peter brand massager, he only needs to be beaten with 100,000 sticks at the current frequency. In other words, in another 4 or 5 hours, the newly improved physical fitness will be increased by 0.1. By then, Bai Ye will directly refresh his physical condition, and no wounds will be gone, not to mention his current superhuman self-healing ability. A wound like this that didn't even break a bone can only be considered a skin injury and can be healed in a few hours." Looking at the red-stained steel rod in his hand, Peter looked a little ugly. "Even if you can accept it, I can't do it. The blood on your back has splattered on my clothes. Hey, you are still picky about your work. If you can't stand it, just hit my arms and thighs first." Bai Ye sighed. He didn't even break his bones, but he couldn't stand it. He was too squeamish. Chapter 34 Mummy. You are listening at NovelFlow.audio. In the gym, Bai Ye was receiving crazy beatings from Peter, from the back to the arms and thighs, and finally directly to the chest and abdomen. The beaten areas first turned red, then bruised, and finally the flesh was broken and blood flowed out. Half an hour later, blood continued to overflow from the wounds on Bai Ye's body, dyeing his clothes bright red, and he became a bloody man. But the one who couldn't stand it more than Bai Ye was Peter Parker. After hitting him continuously for half an hour, he let go of the steel rod stuck to Bai Ye's flesh and sat on the ground. "Why don't you fight?" Bai Ye looked at Peter, who was sitting on the ground, and asked doubtfully. Obviously he, a man covered in blood, has not fallen down yet. "Why did you, the abuser, fall down?" "Bai, I have slapped you more than 10,000 times in a row, and now my arms are so sore." Peter Parker rubbed his arms and looked at his friend in front of him with the eyes of a monster. If it were an ordinary person who was beaten to a pulp like this guy just walked on the horse and didn't even waver in his steps. You, young man, is not strong enough. Bai Ye said, dissatisfied. He obviously has a physical fitness of 2.8, but he has to take a rest in just half an hour. Even the donkeys in the production team don't dare to fish like this. However, although he was not satisfied, Bai Ye also knew that this was indeed the limit of the opponent's physical strength. Although Peter's physical attribute seemed to be 2.8, Bai Ye knew that the physical column represented the body's defense, stamina, aptitude and recovery speed. Peter's physical defense may only reach the extreme value of 2.8 in these 4 items, but the other 3 items are far behind, unlike his panel data that has grown in all directions. Then you should take a rest first and continue in half an hour. I will continue to exercise. Bai Ye said helplessly. While he was speaking, Bai Ye's bleeding wounds all over his body had stopped bleeding and healed, and it would only take another 4 or 5 hours for him to return to normal. Looking at his lively friends, Peter could only step aside and ask, Bai, how long will I have to work today? I can spend the whole day with you. Bai Ye said while grabbing the iron lump and punching forward. Who asked you this? Peter said speechlessly, I'm asking when will I get off work tonight? It's 6 o'clock now. You can choose to go back at 10 o'clock. Bai Ye said, remember to come here immediately after school tomorrow. I know. Peter nodded helplessly. However, since he had already received the $20,000, there was no way he could refuse. He felt that there was a thick barrier of money between him and Bai Ye. 10 minutes later, Peter had almost recovered his strength and continued to beat Bai Ye all over his body. After beating for half an hour, he went aside to rest for 10 minutes, and so on. In the process, Peter also began to find that as his amount of exercise increased, his already strong physical strength began to improve slightly. It seems that the untapped potential in the body is activated during exercise. This discovery made Peter become interested, and he began to be willing to cooperate with Bai Ye. The effect of the exercise was greatly increased, and he even didn't want to go back after 10 o'clock in the evening. It was not until 11 o'clock that Peter, who was really tired, left the gym. After he left, Bai Ye, who had lost his experience pack, also stopped practicing. At this moment, the physical experience bar that had just reached 1.7 in the afternoon has soared to 1.7 plus 0.2, 70%, after a night of exercise. It will definitely increase by 0.1 tomorrow. Feeling impressed by the wonderful experience package of Spider-Man, Bai Ye took out the paper and pen from the corner and began to write the Zhutian magic skill that he would teach Smith tomorrow. According to the mental attribute reaching 1.7, Bai Ye now has almost photographic memory and millimeter-level precision. Holding the pen, Bai Ye drew quickly without any auxiliary tools, leaving afterimages with both hands. In just 2 hours, the entire Zhutian divine art plus Ubuchuan's annotations were reproduced by Bai Ye. After doing this, Bai Ye put away the secret book, feeling that the bloody wounds on his body had not completely healed, so Bai Ye simply sat cross-legged on the cold marble and began to gather energy. An hour later, when 3 more rays of Zhutian Qi appeared in Bai Ye's dantian, the wounds on his body had completely healed. After eating some food to fill his stomach, he stood up and continued practicing. Now he found that he no longer seemed to need sleep, and the damage caused to his body by staying up late had begun to slow down the physical healing rate. I seemed to be becoming less and less human. Bai Ye thought silently in his heart, picked up the iron lump on his side and started to exercise. Late at night, most people in New York City have fallen asleep, and only a few people are still working hard towards their goals. In the corridor of a residential building in Brooklyn, a woman in her 20s, her eyes wide open and her body shriveled, died tragically in front of her home. It's too late again. In front of the mummy, stood a man with a height of 1.9 meters. This man had blue eyes, a black back, a tall and muscular build, and was wearing a windbreaker. There is a white skull printed on the man's chest t-shirt, which looks murderous. The man knelt down and gently pushed the woman's head away. 2 bloody holes suddenly appeared on her neck. Damn vampire bastard. The man cursed inwardly and stood up, turned around and walked into the darkness, then took out his phone and dialed a number. Hey, Matt, when will your body be ready to go on a mission? In the hospital, Matt was lying on the bed again. Victor, it may take me 2 weeks to recover before I can walk normally. Is there anything you need my help with? It's those blood-sucking bastards who can't finish killing them. Although the bastards were very restless in the past, they hunted in a regular and specific location, but this month there have been 7 cases of dead bodies being sucked dry. I wonder what they are doing. Big move. What about Blade? I remember vampires have always been his domain. Matt's expression became serious. I tried to find him, but he completely lost contact yesterday. That's why I came to you. How about I recommend someone to you? Who do you recommend? That's the student who was on TV a few days ago. I think he has great potential and I want you to teach him. Matt said. You know I don't like bringing in new people, but I will pay attention. Compared to him, I admire the murderer more. The murderer? Who? He's the mutant who wiped out all 3 gangs in the past 2 days. I think his behavior is to my liking. Victor said and hung up the phone. The previous book club group has been blown up. Readers who are still interested can click on the portal at the end of each chapter or after the introduction to join the new group. Chapter 35 People's physiques are not the same. You are listening at NovelFlow.audio. Late at night, in Manhattan, an ancient building made entirely of stone stands here. Inside this building, a strong man with shiny black skin and a very powerful look wearing a black windbreaker was firmly restrained by steel, looking at the pale-skinned man in front of him with murderous intent in his eyes. Are you okay? Blade. The man with cold white skin and bloodless skin stood in front of the Blade warrior surrounded by everyone around him. I invited you before. As long as you join us and contribute 2 liters of blood in your body, the entire vampire race will become great again because of the arrival of the blood god. It's a pity that you refused, so now you can only crawl in front of me like a dog. The man bent down and looked at Blade's kneeling position with a smile on his face. Dickon, do you think a mere vampire can rule this world? A contemptuous smile appeared on Blade's face. The blood god in your mouth should first distinguish himself from the mutants who have been suppressed by humans. Mutant? Ha ha ha. Dickon laughed out loud at this moment. Do you think I am the same as those pure-blooded antiques? Humans can be transformed into vampires, and mutants can naturally do the same. However, genetic conflict carries a great risk of death. I have done experiments a long time ago and personally transformed a mutant vampire. Dickon watched the change in Blade Warrior's face and said even more proudly, after I transform into a blood god, relying on the blood of the Supreme, mutants will only be a member of the blood-sucking army, and humans will just be my food. Enjoy your last moments. When the full moon comes, we will use the blood of the Sunwalker as a sacrifice to officially welcome the arrival of the blood god. After Dickon finished speaking, he waved his hand gently, and the men behind him stepped forward and dragged the Blade Warrior into the dungeon and imprisoned him. Strength, 1.7 plus 0.2. Physique, 1.8 plus 0.2. Spirit, 1.7. In the early morning, the purple energy on Bai Ye's face slowly gathered and he stood up. Straighten your hands and stretch slightly, and you can feel the great vitality bursting out of the muscles and bones of the body. The body's physique has been improved too fast, which has caused the healing speed to increase. Now it not only takes more time to corrode the skin, but it only takes 2 hours to completely recover. Bai Ye thought to himself and looked at the door. He had already heard the footsteps outside the door. With a creak, Smith opened the door and walked in with excitement. Last night, when I thought about how I could practice martial arts today, I was so excited that I didn't sleep well all night. Here you are, the book in the corner is Zhutian magic. After you learn it first, we can talk about the next plan. Bai Ye pointed to the secret book placed in the corner. Is this the martial arts you practice in Bai? Smith walked to the corner with anticipation, holding up the notebook in front of him with both hands, only to find that the book he thought was quaint actually had a notebook brand on the cover. In a strange mood, Smith flipped through the contents. The entire book is like a student's notebook. Not only is every key point densely recorded in English, but it also has hand-drawn illustrations, which should be understandable by humans with normal intelligence. Don't be stunned. Practice quickly. If you don't know anything, just ask me directly. When you have developed the internal strength in your body, I will directly teach you the skills. Bai Ye urged. Smith walked aside and looked through the secret book given by Bai Ye, and began to understand the concepts of internal force, dantian and meridians, and felt that it was unscientific. Bai Ye continued to exercise and answered some of Smith's questions from time to time. Soon, in a state of serious teaching and serious study, it was not until 1 o'clock in the afternoon that Smith was completely introduced and officially began to cultivate internal strength. Then 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, just when Smith was doubting whether there was any internal power, or whether Bai Ye was deceiving himself, a trace of internal power finally flowed through Smith's body. It's here, Bai. I feel the internal energy mentioned in the book. Smith shouted excitedly, and then the weak internal energy in his body disappeared directly with the movement of his body, but Smith was not discouraged. After all, this confirmed that such a thing as internal strength did exist. As long as he meditated for more than 2 hours, wouldn't he be able to come out again? Looking at Smith's excited look, Bai Ye muttered with a strange expression, "You can really practice it?" Smith asked in confusion, "Bai, what did you say?" "It's nothing. Your actions just now caused your internal strength to disconnect. You can practice hard for another 2 hours. Bai Ye said. "No problem," Smith said passionately. "The most important thing about this is the process from 0 to 1. After Smith sat cross-legged again, Bai Ye shook his head slightly in confusion. In fact, he had some doubts about whether Smith could cultivate his internal strength. After all, the world is different, and the physiques are naturally different. People in Jin Yong's martial arts world definitely do not have mutant genes, and people in Marvel should not have internal energy meridians. The diversity of human bodies in different worlds has led to the emergence of infinite cultivation systems, mutant genes, chakra, internal power, acupoints, domineering, small universe, limiter, gene lock, God's restricted area, magnetic field rotation, trickster. If every system can communicate with each other, imagine that so many systems cannot explode directly in the human body. The cultivation methods in each world are different and even completely contradictory. How can they all be compatible? Think about it. If there are meridians in the real world, they should have been discovered by anatomy long ago. How could Bai Ye come out with the Zhutian magic power to show off now? Bai Ye's ability to practice may be due to his status as a member of the chat group and his infinitely stronger physique, but why can Smith be able to practice? I can't figure it out. With this confusion, Bai Ye looked back at Smith, who was still having fun behind him, and kept it silently in his heart, not delving further into it. This issue is not something he should consider now that his strength is 1.9, thinking is bound to lead to no answer, so Bai Ye doesn't dwell on this issue and calms down to practice silently. Not long after school in the afternoon, Peter also came to the gym after school. He saw Smith sitting cross-legged in the corner and practicing seriously and asked with some confusion, "Bai, who is this?" "He is my fitness coach. He is practicing martial arts now. Do you want to practice?" Bai Ye asked. "Anyway, I will prepare to sell it when the time comes, and the upper limit of Zhutian magic skill is very low. It will take effect slowly, and it will not threaten him. As long as it does not spread on a large scale, there is nothing to hide." Martial arts. The kind in movies. It can be said that if you can learn to read it when you rest, it will not be harmful to your body. Bai Ye said, gently putting down the iron lump in his hand and looking towards the door. Behind the door, there is a person lurking secretly. He was hiding there a minute ago, sneaking around. Chapter 36. Only 1 point better than you. You are listening at NovelFlow.audio. Hey, you guys who are hiding at the door and eavesdropping, why don't you come in and talk? Bai Ye twisted his arm slightly and said calmly. As he spoke, Peter also looked in the direction of the door. After concentrating his attention, Peter also heard the heartbeat coming from the door, and was surprised when the guy was hiding behind the door. Daredevil is right, you do have potential. A deep male voice came from the door, and then the door was pushed open. A man with a skull printed on his t-shirt walked in from the door, staring at Bai Ye appreciatively. Daredevil? Did he lure you here? Bai Ye frowned and said, I just want to live a peaceful life now. Why are you superheroes always haunting you? Can you please get out? Thinking of Daredevil who had his hands and feet broken but was still attracting bees and butterflies to him, Bai Ye wanted to go to the hospital and punch him 2 more times so that he could attract more monsters to him when he had nothing to do, right? He is a superhero. And you also know Daredevil? Peter looked at the man in front of him curiously. This was the first time he saw a superhero. Of course, let me solemnly introduce to you that this is the Punisher. Like Daredevil, he is a local street hero in New York and the nemesis of crime in New York City. The only drawback is that I have been working in this place for 4 or 5 years since my debut. As a result, Kingpin is still making a name for himself in the underworld, and I don't know what he has been doing to fight crime these years. Bai Ye solemnly introduced the Punisher to Peter. As the Punisher's face gradually darkened, Bai Ye suddenly realized that Peter, Spider-Man, would be like this in the future. Boy, don't you feel a little arrogant? The Punisher walked up to Bai Ye, and at 1.9 meters tall, he slightly lowered his head and looked down at Bai Ye, who was half a head shorter than him, and said, the greater the ability, the greater the responsibility. A peaceful life must be earned by oneself. If you don't eliminate those crimes, no one can calm down. Here we go again. Is this the only way you superheroes can talk? Bai Ye rolled her eyes. After I became an orphan 3 years ago, I don't believe in your chicken soup. I'm too lazy to argue with you. If I have something to say, I'll just get out. Before we get down to business, I need to conduct an inspection on you. If your strength is not qualified, then. Before the Punisher finished speaking, his expression immediately changed, because Bai Ye's right fist broke through the air and hit his abdomen, and the speed of the attack was much faster than his. You're talking nonsense. Bai Ye's lips trembled, but he was only halfway out of his words when his right fist hit the Punisher's arm with his hands crossed to block. Tyrannosaurus-like power penetrated the Punisher's tense body, instantly sending his body flying into the air. How could it be so fast? Surprise or shock appeared in the Punisher's eyes, but before his soaring body reached its highest point, Bai Ye's right fist had transformed into a palm. She gently covered his head with her right palm, then pulled his head and pushed him hard to the ground. The whole process took less than a second, and Bai Ye had already overwhelmed the superhero in front of him, who was not inferior to Daredevil in terms of combat power, to the ground. Until then, Bai Ye slowly uttered the second half of his sentence, too much. How can it be? Didn't Matt say that this guy is only slightly stronger than me and has no skills at all, so he can be defeated as long as he handles it carefully? The Punisher's head was trembling as he was pinned to the ground, and he was extremely shocked. Matt, you are a GZZ. You gave me false information. Do you think you are just a little better than me? What the Punisher didn't know at this moment was that Matt was actually exaggerating. Bai Ye's strength is not that much stronger than him, but only a mere 0.5. Of course, this is calculated based on the calculation method of the attribute panel, description column. Detect your attack on others and analyze opponent data. Name, Frank Castle, strength, 1.4. Agility, 1.4. Constitution, 1.4. Spirit, 1.4. Charisma, 1.1. Bai Ye silently looked at the Punisher's data panel. There was not much difference in numerical values from Daredevil. They were both human extreme warriors who had experienced hundreds of battles, and in just 5 days, he had gone from relying on surprise to narrowly win, to now being able to kill instantly without any suspense. Now when I face this kind of street superhero, the difference in average value is only 0.5, which can no longer be smoothed out by relying on human C tactics. Even if there are 10,000 of this kind of thing, I won't be afraid. Bai Ye thought so. Gathering his mind, Bai Ye looked at the lying Punisher, retracted his right palm, and gently tapped the opponent's head with a beady index finger like white jade. The Punisher, who was lying on the ground, tried hard to get up, but felt that an iron rod was firmly pressing on his head, making him unable to raise his head. The result of using force will only be that his fragile skull will be pierced by Bai Ye's fingers first. Facing the Punisher's mortal body, Bai Ye, whose physical fitness was several times greater than his, could make him unable to turn over with just a gentle force on his index finger. Bai Ye looked down at the Punisher, who was taller than him, with calm eyes, and said slowly, "Can you tell me now, what's the matter with you here? Bai, how about you let him go first and then talk about it?" Peter on the side begged. Then he looked down at the superhero, who was so arrogant before, now like a turtle being held down by his shell, unable to move. He was a little disillusioned with the superhero filter. It turns out that superheroes aren't that strong. If I had taken action for Bai, he might have died faster. Peter thought to himself, looking at the other party's appearance at this time. Bai Ye thought about it. Although these superheroes differ greatly in strength, their bones are all as strong as one's own, and they are all unable to speak until they are beaten to death. The more coerced they are, the more excited they may be, but they cannot be rewarded. Gently loosening his fingers, the Punisher quickly stood up from the ground with his hands on the ground, glanced at Bai Ye in surprise, and told the purpose of coming here. Vampires in New York have been very active recently. This month alone, 7 corpses that had been drained of their blood have been found. I suspect they are up to something big. I originally wanted to find Mark, but he recommended you to me due to physical reasons. Now it has been proven that your strength far exceeds mine, so I would like to invite you to find the reason behind it together. The Punisher said. The Punisher made such a big statement, but in Bai Ye's view, didn't this mean, the Punisher has sent you a side mission request, Vampire Rebellion, do you accept it? I refuse. Bai Ye said without hesitation, then stretched out his right hand and pointed in the direction of the door. You can leave. Chapter 37 Entrepreneurial Thinking. You are listening at NovelFlow.audio. Looking at the Punisher, who asked to form a team, Bai Ye chose to refuse without hesitation. It would be okay if he were to shoot some bank robbers armed with guns. With his current body, he would probably die unless he was shot 7 or 8 times in the same place in the head with a pistol. Do good deeds when there is no danger, then Bai Ye will occasionally be interested in it. Just relax your body. But vampires are something that sounds supernatural at first glance and seems extremely troublesome. Whoever wants to do it will do it. His current strength does not support his expansion to this point. Faced with Bai Ye's expulsion order, the Punisher did not continue to argue and chose to leave without hesitation. The crush just now was embarrassing enough, so there was no need to continue to pester him, but before leaving, Bai Ye stopped him. By the way, I remember the vampire aspect. Isn't that Blade Warrior handling it? You, an ordinary person, got involved. Isn't it a bit over the top? Bai Ye curiously asked the same question as Matt. The Blade lost contact the day before yesterday and seems to have been killed. After the Punisher said these words, he left directly, leaving Bai Ye deep in thought. Bai, are there really vampires? Peter Parker felt that his worldview had collapsed. Is there so much hidden behind this peaceful world? I've seen mutants before, but I still can't accept vampires. They're just a bunch of shady things. In terms of strength, 99% of them can't beat you who have mutated now. Bai Ye said, lost in thought. He didn't expect that people sitting at home would bump into the script of Blade Runner next door, but according to the original plot, no matter which one it is, it can be solved independently even without me, right? Bai Ye thought with some uncertainty in his heart. After all, the universe he is currently in is definitely not the original Earth 199999 Avengers universe, but a strange world in the Marvel multiverse that is an inexplicable mixture of multiple independent worldviews. Vampires, Spider-Man, Iron Man and mutants all grow wildly in the same worldview. It is really unpredictable what will happen in the end due to the butterfly effect. With inexplicable anxiety about his own strength, Bai Ye picked up the steel rod on the ground and threw it at Peter. Same as yesterday, use him to hit me. While keeping the frequency constant, increase the strength by 20%. 20%. Peter looked at Bai Ye in surprise, but still nodded heavily, and based on what Bai Ye said, he whipped Bai Ye's body with more strength. Soon, the dull sound of steel bars hitting rubber tires was heard throughout the gym. The deep voice could even be vaguely heard by other people working out below. They all looked up at the ceiling with inexplicable expressions, thinking that it was being renovated above. Due to the increased strength, the duration of Peter's whipping was shortened, and he had to stop and relax his hands after only 25 minutes. Of course, Bai Ye noticed Peter Parker's current mental state more than his physical exhaustion. "Since just now, why are you always absent-minded?" Bai Ye asked Peter, who was looking down at him in thought. "Bai, I was thinking about what the Punisher said just now." Peter was silent for a moment and then stopped what he was doing and said, "You asked me, after we have this ability, should we use it to become a superhero like them and help more people?" Faced with his question, Bai Ye did not speak, but turned her head and stared at him for a long time without speaking. The look in his eyes made Peter feel a little scared, and he wondered if his friend was angry. For a moment, the atmosphere in the entire gym became a little quiet. For a long time, Bai Ye slowly withdrew his gaze and continued to exercise, urging, "What are you doing standing there in a daze? Don't stop moving your hands." Phew. Peter breathed a sigh of relief and continued to wave the steel rod in his hand. "Should I say that he is truly a good person who only threatens his boss to raise his salary even if he becomes a black man? Even if Uncle Ben is not dead now, he is still ready to take the old path of a superhero." Bai Ye was a little depressed, wondering if the part-time salary he had given him was too high. As a result, Peter Parker, who had no pressure to survive, began to pursue spiritual wealth, not to be a superhero. Of course, Bai Ye also knew that this guy's character was that of a born good man, and there was nothing he could do to persuade him. He could only silently wish him well on his journey to the lonely star of heaven. However, the day before yesterday I asked Smith to go to the factory to purchase and modify the stamping machine. Even if he spent money to save the license and other procedures, at least 10 days and a half would have passed. The window period during this period cannot be wasted. At the very least, the remaining value is squeezed out. Bai Ye thought silently, then suddenly looked at Peter and said, "Peter, if you insist on becoming a superhero, I won't stop you. But have you considered how to balance your hobbies and life? Being a superhero does not come with any subsidies or guarantees. I remember that you were raised by your uncle and aunt. Don't you think about them?" This. Peter immediately fell into deep hesitation, thinking of how happy Uncle Ben and the others were after he took out 20,000 yuan in cash this morning and told them about his part-time job. Their hearts that were about to move immediately cooled down. "Don't forget, I have already paid a high salary of 20,000 yuan for a part-time job a month in advance. I won't stop you from becoming a superhero, but at least the first month of work cannot be delayed," Bai Ye said. "I understand." Peter nodded solemnly after thinking for a while. Plan goes through. Seeing Peter agree, Bai Ye thought happily, sure enough, Paulu in the real world is still too unstable. As a boss, he has to take care of the emotions of his employees. It is really contrary to Tiangang, it is not as hardworking as the ordered machine, which will not stop as long as the internal parts are not damaged. After half a month, the modern equipment at the factory will be developed and it will be able to directly optimize backward manual workers like Peter. Of course, this is not about layoffs, but about sending high-level talents to the outside world. It is to transport Peter, a high-level labor force, to the streets of New York to continue to be his superhero, to contribute to the construction of capitalism in the United States and to shine. At this moment, Peter didn't know that Bai Ye beside him had already thought about how to optimize him, but he was still working hard to train Bai Ye without knowing anything. Even in Peter's heart, he was full of gratitude. He felt that he had even mentioned the idea of leaving, but the other party actually thought of him so much. He was such a good friend. There's still not enough time. Bai Ye felt regretful. From the time he obtained the panel to now, various events have been attracted to him like a magnet, and he can't even hide from them. It's just too late. Chapter 38 Encountering a Ghost. You are listening at NovelFlow.audio. Only 7 or 8 days have passed since Bai Ye obtained the panel, but the days are like plugging in a motor that won't stop. One thing after another jumped into his life, making him unable to escape. During every exercise, Bai Ye is thinking about how to exercise better and how to develop better in the future, but time constraints prevented him from making many things. In the final analysis, the growth period is too short. He is too weak now and has not even passed the development period. Just like a stamping machine, could he not know that this thing has huge benefits for exercise? However, whether we wait for the approval documents or find someone to modify it, it cannot be done in a short time. Moreover, when he gets this trick, the money spent on purchases and modifications will be spent again, and the living expenses will be insufficient. There are not many ways to make money, but taking the white road is either troublesome or takes time. Just build a stamping machine and that's it. Better training equipment, such as voltage machines, mustard gas, or even directly trying to eat a nuclear reactor alive. All these cultivation methods require money to support. It's very easy to get money. Just sell the Zhutian magic power. Since this thing can cost up to 20% of the money if it is directly transmitted, let those who have the capital to start a company do it. As long as there are enough people, it is not a problem to become a martial arts master in one night. This is simply a huge market value. The problem is, with Bai Ye's current strength, which can't even defeat Spider-Man, how can he dare to reveal his wealth? Who can you trust in Marvel? The character of Tony Stark, who has not yet become Iron Man, can be trusted, but as the main focus of Snake and S.H.I.E.L.D., Crossbones might not have led a team to knock on your door that night. In this world with mutants as its background, who knows how many mechanical monsters Hydra can come up with. This is also the reason why Bai Ye is trying to keep a low profile at the moment. At least he won't dare to negotiate with those people until the three-dimensional data reaches the level of Spider-Man, otherwise he will have no confidence at all. If Bai Ye had money now, he wouldn't stop Peter from leaving. He might even want to give him millions as a parting gift like Shen-Hao to win people's hearts. Anyone who betrays me can get millions of chicken soup operations. It's a pity that the ideal is very full and the reality is very skinny. According to the secret book, I successfully stored a trace of it in the Dantian, but the infuriating energy is too weak. While Bai Ye was exercising, Smith, who had been sitting cross-legged in the corner and remained calm, spoke. Bai Ye glanced at him, and with blood dripping from his eyes, he put down the iron tube in his hand and nodded. Well, now your back is to me, and I will send you a ray of Jinchi to test the water. As a living advertisement when negotiating with the gym owner in the future, Bai Ye planned to give Smith a novice benefit of a 10-day experience package upon logging in, so as to experience the effect of the so-called transfer of skills from this gentleman's sword. Bai Ye, are you going to teach me the kung fu? Smith's eyes widened. He had read Bai Ye's handwritten notes carefully, and of course he knew what it meant to teach him the kung fu. Don't talk nonsense, turn around and I'll teach you the skills. Bai Ye said calmly. Just a ray of true energy would take a whole day for Smith, but it would only take 10 minutes for him now. Soon, as Smith sat cross-legged excitedly, Bai Ye was directly behind him, slowly transmitting the internal energy in his body into Smith's meridians through his clothes. As Zishia's true energy entered his body, Smith immediately held his breath and began to transfer internal energy according to the technique. In 3 minutes, Bai Ye's internal energy was completely transformed, leaving only 8 strands, and Bai Ye also completely lost this source of internal energy. Is this the power transfer? Bai Ye closed his eyes and felt the lack of internal power in his dantian. The whole process was nothing strange, and could even be said to be ordinary. Peter watched with great interest and asked, Can I also learn this internal skill? Whatever, but it can't be spread outside this year. After that, it's up to you. In order to ensure the scarcity of internal power, Bai Ye reminded. Soon, Peter began to exercise Bai Ye while taking advantage of the break to read the notes given by Bai Ye. As a genius whose spirit reached 1.6 before the mutation, he quickly memorized the entire secret manual and prepared to try it out after returning home. Out of gratitude to Bai Ye, Peter helped Bai Ye practice until 11 o'clock in the night before leaving. After everyone left, Bai Ye took advantage of the fact that the whole of New York fell into night, and as before, dragged out the sulfuric acid and began to wash away the traces on his body. Then in the night, he began to sneak into the houses of those gangsters to clean up based on his memories. Now the whole of New York is in a state of panic because of the extermination of 3 gangs, and everyone is on guard. Bai Ye went directly to the door this time, but he missed the target. He only encountered a few armed guards who stayed inside the house. After making the mistake, with the spirit of coming back, Bai Ye visited another location. It was still a trap. Obviously, all these gangsters had learned their lesson. Facing the night, Bai Ye walked on a deserted remote path towards the gym. Along the way, the cool breeze blew, giving people a strange and terrifying feeling. Most of the street lamps emitted a dim light due to aging, which shone on Bai Ye's half-healed sulfuric acid face, as if he had strayed into a horror movie. On the set. Rustling. On the road, Bai Ye's senses could hear the constant sounds of small animals such as insects and geckos crawling and rubbing against the vegetation. At this time, Bai Ye, who was walking on the road, suddenly became startled because he smelled the smell of blood floating in the air. For him, who had been killing people a lot in recent days, he could clearly smell the vitality in the smell of blood. The smell of blood was definitely fresh blood that had just flowed out and had not yet solidified. Did someone just get killed around here? Bai Ye guessed in his heart. Of course, he didn't panic too much. After all, the people who died in his hands, directly and indirectly, almost reached the level of killing 100 people, just a mere murder. Because he didn't hear a heartbeat nearby, Bai Ye guessed that the murderer had left. Just when he was about to step forward to check, there was a sudden noise beside him. Crack, that the sound of a rotten branch being trampled came from the grass, causing Bai Ye to turn his head and shout, "Who is it? What kind of monster are you?" A tall, cold-looking woman walked out of the grass. She looked at Bai Ye's sullen face with fear on her face. Originally, she had just wanted to kill Bai Ye directly in a sneak attack, but after seeing Bai Ye's face, she was so frightened that her legs became weak. Where did this monster come from and look so infiltrative? Looking at the cold and charming woman with a fearful face in front of him, Bai Ye's eyelids twitched slightly. Part of the smell of blood came from the mouth of the woman in front of him. I really encountered a ghost. At this moment, Bai Ye and Leng Yan looked at each other and thought at the same time. Chapter 39 The Holy Body of Innate Worker. You are listening at NovelFlow.audio. On a remote road, two inhuman creatures met face to face. One is physically very different from human beings, and the other is horribly inhuman in appearance. It's true that if you walk too much at night, you will always encounter ghosts. Bai Ye looked at the woman in front of him. There was no heartbeat and the smell of blood continued to escape from her mouth. Thinking of the conversation she had with the Punisher not long ago, the identity of the other party was already revealed. So this is a vampire? Bai Ye guessed in his mind, squatting down slightly, blocking the front with his left hand, and placing his right hand on his lower back. He looked directly at the woman in front of him, ready to fight or escape at any time. You must be a human being. This is the first time I have seen such an ugly person. No wonder you are walking on a small road to avoid scaring others. The woman looked at Bai Ye's appearance with some disgust. It was so ugly that she was frightened. Behind the woman lay a female corpse that had been drained of blood. Since the hunt was seen, it would be better to kill him by the way. Such an ugly person really doesn't even have the desire to suck blood. The woman's eyes flashed with murderous intent, her slender hands were like claws, and she rushed towards Bai Ye, with the woman's speed that exceeded the limit of the human body at this moment. Bai Ye's throat could be ripped off in the blink of an eye, but the next moment. Bai Ye's right hand on his lower back suddenly stretched forward, holding a Glock automatic pistol in his hand. The black muzzle was steadily aimed at the woman, and he pulled the trigger without hesitation. Crack! 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 In a remote suburb, a series of crisp gunshots startled a large number of roosting birds. The woman's fragile throat was hit accurately by 5 bullets in an instant, deeply embedded in the bones. What Bai Ye uses is the traditional American martial arts, American IAI. The whole process takes less than a second and is completed before the woman gets close. As for where the fully automatic pistol came from, after killing so many gangsters, it makes sense to pick one up. The bullets of the pistol can travel at least 200 meters per second, which is something that even today's white knight patters can't keep up with. The reason why Bai Ye can dodge bullets when facing gangsters is because Bai Ye's dodge speed exceeds the time it takes for those people's arms to aim and pull the trigger, but now it's Bai Ye's turn to shoot. It's different. He's not an ordinary person. When the physical fitness of two people exceeds the limit of human beings, and with Bai Ye's shooting speed at this moment, the woman will never be able to see clearly. unless the woman's dodge speed can really dodge the bullet after being fired, she will become a hornet's nest. The woman covered her throat and looked at the fully automatic pistol in Bai Ye's hand in disbelief, as if to say that Bai Ye did not follow martial ethics. Description column, detect you. Launching attacks on others and collect opponent data. Name, Carrie Camilla, strength, 1.9. Agility, 1.7. Physique, 4.3. Spirit, 1.6. Charisma, 1.3. Basic attributes are not as good as mine, so I should be able to run away, but this 4.3 physique. Bai Ye looked at the female vampire's throat that was easily pierced by the bullet. The defense was even worse than her own, that is to say, this attribute is given based on the opponent's healing ability. Bai Ye's eyes became a little more serious, and the fully automatic pistol that he was about to continue firing was put away behind his waist, his eyes fixed on the vampire in front of him. Sure enough, during the breath, the bullet in the woman's throat was squeezed out by the healed flesh and blood visible to the naked eye, and fell to the soil. Seeing the other party return to normal, Bai Ye asked humbly, "Hello, I would like to ask a question. Is it that you vampires are not only immortal, but also have endless physical strength and will never be tired?" Of course, how can you fragile humans understand the greatness of the vampire clan? As long as you have enough blood. The woman spoke proudly, but halfway through her words, she was shocked to find that the look in the eyes of the hateful man in front of her changed. That kind of look is like a capitalist seeing the innate working body, and he can't even hide it. Okay, it's really hard to find anywhere, it takes no effort to get it. You are exactly the talent I need right now. Bai Ye's voice sounded from far to near, ringing in the vampire's ears. As her eyes rolled in shock, an arm as if made of steel had firmly grasped her forehead. So fast, before the woman's thoughts fully emerged, her body was driven by the incomparable force, and her head in Bai Ye's palm was instantly pressed against the big tree behind her. Boom! Under Bai Ye's pressure, the woman's head seemed to be held up by a hydraulic press. The skull was severely deformed in an instant, and blood began to spurt out from her 7 orifices. The strong tree behind him was imprinted with the shape of the back of the vampire's head by the White Knight. The tree trunk vibrated violently, causing large swaths of leaves to fall from the sky. Pain. Severe pain. Intense pain came like a tide. The next moment, a pair of warm right hands gently touched the vampire's white and soft abdomen, and then gradually applied force. Ah! In this deserted and remote forest, the vampire screamed in pain because she felt as if her abdomen was being opened bit by bit with a blunt instrument. At this time, she found that her sight that had been covered by the man was bright again. She lowered her head and saw that the man's right hand was in the shape of a knife, piercing her abdomen and nailing her to the tree like a coffin nail. Blood was leaking from the wound in his abdomen. Since you have already killed someone, I will not talk to you about humanitarianism. Now you only have 2 choices. Bai Ye stabbed the opponent's abdomen with his right hand and felt the smooth touch from the vampire's cold intestines. He grabbed the vampire's fist with his left hand and squeezed it gently. With a painful scream, the opponent's wrist was instantly crushed by him. The first thing is to be my dog. You don't have to suffer in vain if you do whatever I say. The second is to treat me like a dog after being tortured by me, so that you can show that you have more backbone. As Bai Ye spoke, the other party's deformed skull and abdominal wounds began to heal. Soon the other party's shrinking abdominal wound wrapped around Bai Ye's fingers during the healing process, making him feel that he was worthy of being a vampire. Don't even think about it. The vampire opened his mouth full of fangs, preparing to bite the man in front of him, but the next moment, Bai Ye's fist hit her face, knocking out all the teeth in her mouth and swallowing it into her stomach. Don't worry, you will agree. Bai Ye looked at the moonlight above his head. In the middle of the night, there were no human beings for several miles around. It was the perfect place for torture. I tell you, don't overestimate your own will, let alone the enemy's bottom line. I'm not a good person. Next, I will treat you 10 times as hard as I used to train myself, until you can no longer bear it and start begging for mercy. Bai Ye raised the corners of his mouth slightly, looking at the invincible woman in front of him, and the right hand that had stopped exerted force again, completely penetrating her abdomen. Chapter 40. You smell so good. You are listening at NovelFlow.audio. Late at night, Bai Ye walked towards the club with a bloody body on his shoulders. It has to be said that this female vampire's will is remarkable. She actually persisted for 2 full minutes under his torture. On the shoulder, the female vampire was lying on Bai Ye's body as if she was helpless. Although the wound had healed, there were still waves of phantom pain. The woman looked at the ugly man carrying her with some annoyance, and had already begun to think about what would happen if she fell into the other man's clutches. Women are aware of their appearance, and they are not the kind of ghosts who are not aware of their beauty, and she was even more frightened by the appearance of Bai Ye, a guy who could scare vampires to the point of seeing ghosts. Thinking of the horrific torture technique just now, the girl reasonably deduced that the perverted man in front of her was definitely the type of person who had a psychological distortion due to his ugly appearance since childhood. The vampire recalled the Western fantasy works he had seen in the past. It was like a beautiful woman falling into a goblin lair. The consequences could be guessed without even explaining it. Along the way, the two of them were silent and had no need to communicate. They just returned to the club in silence and without any trouble. Returning to the second floor of the club, Bai Ye put the woman down and said, "Now go to the bathroom and take a shower. Wash off the blood on your body and come to me to report. Don't try to escape. I can hear every move you make." Bai Ye looked at the woman threateningly and said, "If I catch you this time, no matter how you beg for mercy, I will torture you until dawn." After saying that, Bai Ye threw out a set of loose clothes that he wore when exercising, and then ignored the woman. He found a bathroom stall and washed himself away from the vampire's blood. After a brief rinse, Bai Ye walked out and saw a woman walking out of the bathroom wearing her own clothes. The girl's curvaceous figure was covered with Bai Ye's somewhat loose coat, which made some places look full of spring. The expression on Bai Ye's face didn't change much, but when he saw the vampire's face, he was stunned for a moment. Because she found that the ugly man with a good figure in front of her had almost disappeared from the scary scars on his face. And didn't he originally have a buzz cut? Why has my hair almost doubled in length? Don't be stunned, I don't care for lazy people. Bai Ye motioned for the other party to follow him, then walked into the private gym and pointed at the bloody steel rod in the corner. "Now, take it and hit it with 60% of your strength." Ah. The vampire looked at Bai Ye blankly, wondering if the other person was sick and had such a good thing. "Ah, what? If you don't attack me, then I will attack you." Bai Ye watched the other party pick up the stick and stare at his head, eager to try it. He picked up the 2-ton iron lump beside him and reminded. "You can only attack the back, arms and thighs. If you dare to hit me on the head, your head will be crushed by the iron block in my hand in the next second." "Got it." The vampire responded depressedly, glanced at Bai Ye's face, which had begun to take on a human form, picked up the steel rod in his hand and hit Bai Ye's back with 70% of the force. "Anyway, if you don't beat him, it won't be in vain. Beating this ugly monster can relieve your anger." Before this, the vampire didn't know how this guy got his monster-like physique. As a result, after an hour of continuous beating, her skin and flesh were bruised, but her face remained unchanged. She seemed to understand a little. Especially as time goes by, Bai Ye's appearance begins to return to normal, and her image in the eyes of vampires begins to change. Initially, in the eyes of vampires, they were evil and terrifying inhuman creatures, and then they turned into ugly, psychologically twisted goblins. After taking a bath, Bai Ye evolved into a pretty good troll goblin. Half an hour later, Bai Ye, who had almost recovered, turned into an extremely hateful but determined human imp. Until just now, the fully restored Bai image, after the charm returned to 1.4, transformed into my evil and overbearing human master image. Although she was still reluctant, if Bai Ye wanted to coax her now, it didn't seem like it would be hard to accept it. "Are you a mutant? Why does it heal so fast, and where did the scars on your face come from?" Seeing Bai Ye's appearance at this moment, the female vampire also had the desire to communicate and kept asking questions. "Too much nonsense. If you want to live, just do my job properly and don't ask so many questions," Bai Ye said impatiently, and the next moment he saw the stick falling on him stopped. "What are you disturbing?" Bai Ye looked back at the vampire impatiently and said, "If you don't make up a good reason for me now, just wait and moan." I have no strength left, the vampire said, sitting on the ground. Didn't you say you have unlimited physical strength? Bai Ye frowned. That's when there is blood. I was tortured by you for so long and now I am exercising, so the blood I absorbed has long been exhausted. The vampire looked at the blood dripping from Bai Ye's body due to the whipping, stretched out his bright red tongue and licked his lips and said, to put it simply, I need to drink blood. From the sight of blood flowing out of Bai Ye's body just now, he felt an inexplicable attraction. This feeling was something she had never felt before, like a great tonic, but before that, because she was sucking the blood of fresh virgins, and Bai Ye was so ugly, sucking it was a bit off-putting to her, so she kept suppressing it. Now that she has regained her appearance, she decided to break through the bottom line in a small way. It's really troublesome, you have to suck blood, right? Bai Ye said helplessly, because vampires can choose whether to transform the other person into a vampire when sucking blood, so it would be funny to prevent them from actually transforming themselves when sucking blood, so he took out the bowl he had eaten from the corner, directly touched the aorta of his left arm with his right thumb, and poked it in with all his strength. Soon, a steady stream of blood flowed from the artery and spilled into the bowl, in order to prevent the blood from stopping flowing. Bai Ye's fingers constantly moved the aorta to prevent it from healing quickly. Soon, as a bowl full of blood flowed in front of him, Bai Ye lifted his thumb, he handed out the bright red and even fragrant blood in front of him and said, Number, it's the blood you want. The vampire almost snatched the blood from Bai Ye's hand, raised the corner of his mouth and took a sip. The next moment, rich energy was released from the fragrant blood. The energy contained in just this small mouthful is equivalent to the blood of the woman she absorbed before, and the taste is also ridiculously good for a vampire. She drank almost all the blood in the bowl. After licking the blood in the bowl clean, she was almost addicted to drinking and even looked at Bai Ye's blood-stained skin with some blurred eyes. She wished she could stick out your tongue and lick it from top to bottom.